Housekeeping stuff, Belmont Books. Thank you all for coming. We're located in the greater Boston area. I thank you all for being willing to get on your computer after a long day of probably working from your computer. We're just trying to do the best we can and get people together to talk about books. Tomorrow we have another event at this time with Shruti Swami, who's talking about her latest short story collections. And then Thursday we have Craft on Draft, which is brought to you by the Grub Street and Novel Incubator. So they usually get together a few authors to talk about a certain topic. So I think like Rishi Reddy, Daphne Colette, and Jeffrey Colvin will be there to talk about authentic fiction. Usually beer is involved, which is why it's called Craft on Draft. So we highly recommend everyone have a beverage of their choice. And then last but not least, if you are interested in buying any of the books from these lovely authors tonight, Belmont Books does ship throughout the US, and we're currently offering 20% off when you buy 3 or more books through Belmont. I think if you do it online, the discount code is early shopper. So you can get all of these books at a discount and you support an independent bookstore, which is always great. Yay! So I'm going to introduce these authors and then Mallory is going to moderate. We're so excited, especially because it's spooky season. So we'll start with Alexis. Alexis Henderson is a speculative fiction writer with a penchant for dark fantasy, witchcraft, and cosmic horror. She grew up in one of America's most haunted cities, Savannah, Georgia, which instilled in her a lifelong love of ghost stories. Currently, Alexis resides in the sun-soaked marshland of Charleston, South Carolina. I feel like a kindred spirit with Alexis because I grew up in North Florida and loved Savannah, Georgia. And if I didn't live in Boston, I would live in Charleston, South Carolina. It is beautiful.
Kindred spirits.
Kindred spirits. Zoya Stage is the author of Wonderland, which the New York Times called mind-bending, and the USA Today and international bestseller Baby Teeth. She is a former filmmaker with a love of love for the dark and suspenseful. She lives in Pittsburgh. Fair warning, Zoya had to, call an audible and hook up a phone, so she might tap out a little early on this one, depending on her phone's battery. So everyone keep your fingers crossed. Elizabeth Thomas grew up in Brooklyn, New York, where she still lives and now writes. She graduated from Yale University and currently works as an archivist for a modern art museum. Catherine House is her first novel. And everyone give a round of applause for Elizabeth for voting today and standing in line for 2 hours to vote. Doing her democratic duty.
Yeah, it was great.
And Mallory O'Meara is an award-winning and best-selling author. Her first book, The Lady from the Black Lagoon, Hollywood Monsters and the Lost Legacy of Millicent Patrick. Her second book, which I'm very excited for, is called Girly Drinks. It's the history of women making and drinking alcohol all over the world, and is forthcoming from Hanover Square Press in 2021. Every week, Mallory hosts the literary podcast Reading Glasses alongside filmmaker and writer Brea Grant. She lives in Los Angeles. I believe the podcast is on the Maximum Fun Network, which is an amazing network of podcasts who do some great charity work during the holidays, so definitely check them out. And thank you all for coming. Mallory?
So folks, quick bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, because we are going to do a Q&A at the end, please put them not in the chat. Put them in the Q&A area, because if they go into the chat, you are just throwing them into the void and I will never see them ever. Putting them in the Q&A is how I get to read them to these incredible authors here. So happy Halloween. Thank you for joining us as a mass hole, I should say. I'm not from Boston, but I'm from Haverhill. I'm excited to be doing this event with Belmont Books. And so for our authors, so each book that we're talking about here today is set in an unsettling place. We have a creepy school, we have a creepy farmhouse, we have a creepy village with a creepy forest. So tell me about your setting and about how you created it. Was it like the first part of the story that you thought of, maybe based on something in real life?
I can say for mine, for Catherine House, I would say the school, which is also, it's the house that the story takes place in. That's definitely where the book started from. You know, it's called Catherine House. And really, actually, when I first came up with the idea for the book, I decided that I wanted it to be a kind of story about this. I wanted it to be a love story, but instead of it being about, you know, a woman falling in love with a man or whatever, I wanted it to be kind of about a woman falling in love with a house. I wanted to kind of see what that would look like. So yeah, I really started with the setting. But the house, Catherine House, is also kind of surrounded by these woods. So I also loved reading about any kind of those spooky woods.
Yeah, mine kind of started with setting too, especially in the sense of weather, because I had started to envision what sort of story could I do in snow. Because I'm very, with my background in film, I find snow to be extremely cinematic. And then when I realized I couldn't do anything super realistic with snow, with the kind of story I wanted to do, I realized, I kind of want to do something that seems like it's a place that's haunted by the weather. And so obviously I needed to have a specific location, but the setting in terms of the weather is very important. And there's also an element in my book of a tree, of a very old tree that's very important, and the farmhouse itself. And the farmhouse actually was inspired in part by a little ramshackle house where my parents and a ton of their friends used to go on the weekends. And it barely had electricity. It did not have running water, didn't have plumbing. It was super hardcore rustic. The house in my book is not quite as rustic, but that kind of house and that kind of setting was definitely very inspirational for the story itself.
So for me, I knew that I wanted to sort of write a story that was about a cult. And I knew that this cult was kind of obsessed with this idea of goodness and purity and all of those things. And I wanted another setting in the book that could kind of sit opposite that. So when I was growing up, I lived in Michigan, and our house was on the cusp of this forest. And when I was little, my mom would always tell me, don't go into the woods. Like, it's scary. There's bad things in there. Don't go into the woods. So I was always really tempted by the forest. And to me, it kind of represented this like dark, forbidden thing. So I think it came naturally to me when I started writing The Year of the Witching that I would set the wild or the wilderness opposite this like structured, rigid church society, this theocracy. So that's kind of how I approach that dynamic. And they're kind of opposites. And I think that my main character sort of feels pulled between the two, much like I did.
So speaking of main characters, in all of your books, there is a striking woman who is navigating all of these like creepy settings. Tell me how you created her. Is she an avatar for yourself or someone that you were inspired by, or is she just like a wholly magical person that sprung from your brain?
My main character, Orla, part of my idea with her is I wanted her to be the opposite of my last protagonist, Suzette, in Baby Teeth, because Suzette was extremely insecure about being a mother and very self-conscious in certain ways. And Orla, I really wanted to have a mother character who was the opposite of that, who was very confident about herself, really does not give a shit what anybody else thinks of her, what her style is, what her parenting is, what her work is. And so there was that aspect of it. And I also, throughout the story, I'll give nothing, away about the story, but I wanted her to chance to kind of be a superhero mom. So to not just have that kind of confidence about herself as a woman and a mother, but to really like have to do something extraordinary and be extremely brave and draw on resources inside herself that maybe she never knew she had.
For my main character, Emmanuel, she's a shepherdess, and she kind of grew up really brainwashed in this theocracy, kind of adhering to the system of beliefs and kind of always trying to prove her worthiness or her holiness because by nature of her birth, she's biracial and she's the illegitimate child of her mother and father. She's always been kind of pushed to the fringes. And Emmanuel had this kind of like innate darkness. Some of it's kind of like attached to her anxiety or stress or something like that, but there's this draw toward things that are like forbidden and dark. And it kind of like resides in her, and she carries that. And I think I really wanted to write a main character that explored that, because that was something that sort of characterized my upbringing, always feeling like I was flirting with these things that were so forbidden to me, and feeling like inexplicably drawn to all of like the dark, gory, bloody things. And so Emmanuel kind of has that coded into her too. And I kind of wanted to see a character that sort of flirted with that, and also was open to sort of embracing her rage, her anger, and all the things that she sort of denies within herself. So that's where she came from. I think she's kind of like what I would hope to be, but I fall a lot like really short of Emmanuel. But I would like to see Emmanuel like when I grow up someday.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love your description of that. My main character, Inez, I thought she was very fun to write, but I would say that if I think of her in many ways as kind of like my opposite. Like I would not, I would say, for example, feel drawn to, like, if someone says, you know, don't go into the woods, I would like definitely not go into the woods. I am like, so I like reading about the scary woods and about you know, horror books and horror movies and things, but otherwise in real life I am so well behaved. I am so I am not curious about dark corners at all. So I kind of thought it would be really, really fun to write a character who in any given situation would basically do the opposite of what I did, who was just like, yeah, of course I'm going to go explore. You told me not to go do that. Obviously I'm going to go do that. So she was really fun to write. And she also, I thought it would be really fun to write a character who not only is rebellious in that way, but in a sense also like doesn't even notice that she's rebelling so much, like, but kind of just has so little care for what people think of her, or what she's supposed to be doing. And I think it'd be very frustrating for, I know people like that. I think it can be very frustrating for people around them, but it's very, very fun to write. It's not who I am, but it's fun to write.
Great. So we know that if this becomes a horror movie, Elizabeth is not going to die. She is going to survive. She will be our final girl. This is
Absolutely,
going to be
absolutely. I just hide under the bed, wait for everything to blow over.
amazing. So each one of these novels, with these striking women, they're all at a transitional period in their lives in very different ways in each book. So why do you believe that transitional periods are so ripe for writing horror?
I think it's because we're so vulnerable in transitional periods. Like, it's those periods when, like, either you know, mine takes place when she's going into college. That's a big transition in people's life. Right when someone's leaving college, if you're going through a divorce or something like that. I think all of those periods. I think I also did a lot of research about cults when I was preparing this book, and even though it's not specifically about a cult, I wanted to learn a lot about how cults operate, and I found that a lot of times those are the exact moments when someone might fall into a cult, because when you don't know what you're going to do next, you're really eager for someone to tell you this is what you do next. And I think that that's really dangerous in someone's life, because you're vulnerable, and I think that that's a really good moment for horror.
Exact same thing about being vulnerable and being unstable. You know, in Orla's situation, she's been a ballet dancer her whole life. I mean, she probably started dancing when she was 4, and now she's 41 and she's retiring. So it's like the thing she's done her entire life is gone. And she also had been the breadwinner of the family. So she would have been facing major life adjustment challenges, even if she hadn't moved to a spooky place in the middle of nowhere. So there is something very fun about exploring people's situation when they are at that very vulnerable, unstable stage. And it's not that you want to torture your characters, but they're in a really good position to go
be tortured.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think change is terrifying. And I think what I find most frightening about big transitions or changes is that, like, there's all the external changes, but then your internal changes kind of tend to mirror that. And then you can kind of end up in the situation where you're having to like re-identify yourself, or you're trying to reacquaint yourself with who you've become in light of the things that have changed. And I think that really does lend itself to like dark fiction in general. When there's all these horrible things happening outside or beyond you, and then they're happening within you too, there's just so much good stuff to write about and sink your teeth into.
Yeah, like how many great horror movies and things that are about puberty, or like some some analogies to puberty, something like that. Like all of those that's a very dramatic transitional period. But I mean, yeah, I think like there's nothing more horrible than watching your body transform and and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I think that, yeah, there's a lot that actually happens in our life about change that's really naturally horrifying before you even get into the supernatural or anything.
Totally.
For sure. So one of the most agonizing things in a horror novel is hope. So as authors, how do you give your characters hope in the face of monsters, in the face of cults, in the face of just like despair, depression, anything that's going on with them? How do you find the hope within yourself to give it to your characters?
Well, with Orla, she has a very, very, very strong motivation to protect her children. So a lot of her hope is coming from a place of love and a place of wanting to make sure her children are okay. And also, as I had mentioned before, about tapping into that huge reserve of inner strength. I mean, I think women especially, not that I'm biased, have a huge reserve of inner strength and can do things that, okay, I won't say that men can't do, that's not fair. But that they really are challenged, that they can do things both mentally, physically, emotionally, psychically, that they wouldn't have known that they could do, but really are up to the challenge. So I think that strength is a place of hope. And obviously for Orla, the love of her children and doing anything that she can to try to save her family.
In my book, I think that I have a similar experience where I think that my main character is sort of has a centeredness because she keeps kind of reaching within herself to sort of tap into the sense of strength or hope. But I also think that while I was writing The Year of the Witching, there were instances where things seemed horrific or dark to my main character, and through sort of examining them and questioning why she views certain things as evil and who told her that, she was able to sort of, I guess, have a more compassionate perspective of the things that frightened or scared her or seemed horrific to her. And I think there's sort of hope to be found in that, when you realize the things you're afraid of or the things that you villainize may not be so evil. And so I think when I'm writing, I try to take myself outside of my character's experience or my own experience and sort of find the hope that's in unexpected places, even if those places are sort of horrifying and grim, because it's always there, I think.
It's funny, I was thinking about this and I was like, does Inez, my character, does she have any hope? I don't know if she does. And I think that, I think in the story, without giving anything away, I think that her sense of hope almost comes from, in the end, trusting that she doesn't, that some people have her better interest at heart than she does, and that and that she needs to, sometimes you have to, the greatest amount of hope you can have is just believing that things aren't as dark as they seem to you, and that you kind of have to, if you're feeling very despairing, sometimes your moment of hope is not actually feeling hope, but believing that someday you will feel hope, if that makes sense.
The hope of hope.
Exactly. So that's kind of more how I see it in terms of kind of how it goes toward the end, but kind of this belief that, this situation seems really dark right now, but this is what I need to do to make it better. And even though it doesn't seem like it's going to get better right now, I have to trust that it's going to.
So tropes get a really bad reputation, both in all forms of media, and in films and books and in comics, but they can be really fun and they can sometimes be useful even if you're just, flipping them upside down. Do you, any of you three, have favorite horror tropes? Are there any that you'd like to explore or just completely turn upside down in future work?
I have one that I really love, which is and it's in Haunting of Bly Manor, but the governess goes to a house and has to take care of some really strange kids that see ghosts, and some crazy crap goes down. There might be a romance with a widower or a widow. I don't know. That is my thing. I want that to happen to me. Every time I read those books or watch those movies, I always find myself being maybe I should go to Italy and be a nanny. I crave the experience.
When all these kids are really, really weird, really
They have
haunted.
to be so weird. Like I need them to be telling me about the ghosts they're seeing, and I need to like run through a hall in like a gothic nightgown. I don't care if it's set in present day, like that's
Yes.
I need.
Yes.
And so that's my favorite. I could talk about it all day. I will watch, read, consume anything that like has that trope in it.
Alexis is over here on Craigslist like, ooh, yeah, for a creepy house. Okay, I'm so totally in, like, listing for a nanny position at a castle. Call me right now.
I'm there.
I love that. I obviously love haunted houses. Like all of Catherine House, I think is a play on tropes that I love. I love but I think my favorite is the like, don't go into the West Wing thing. Like, you hear me like, I'm obviously, like, you just know she's going to. It's going to be great. I love that. I always love that. Yeah, that just tickles me. Any type of haunted house, any type of haunted woods, haunted anything. Yeah, and it's funny because I don't really believe in ghosts or anything, but yeah, I just love all that. I love creaking floorboards. Just great stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, my favorite trope, maybe not surprisingly, is evil children. I mean,
Yeah, I love this.
about children, and then some people have some uncertainty about Eleanor Queen in Wonderland, but I have considered like writing other bad seed kind of novels under pseudonyms so that nobody would keep comparing it to Baby Teeth. But I mean, seriously, I've got like multiple evil children ideas, but I don't want to just write evil children. I really don't, but I just love.
But you kind of do though. Lean in.
Yeah.
Write those creepy kids.
The next book, there are not evil children. So the one I'm working on now, which maybe would be book 4, maybe do have a couple of evil children. So.
There is a market for it. You write all the evil children you want. I love this so much. So no secret that 2020 has been a garbage fire of a year for just about everything except for horror books. This is truly an incredible year for horror novels, especially with The Present Company included. So where you like to see the genre go in the next few years? Are there trends happening right now that you want to continue? Stuff you'd love to like leave behind in the past?
I recently watched, I know a lot of people saw it long before me, The Invisible Man. And I was so intrigued by how it conveyed the nightmare of domestic abuse and gaslighting. Mm-hmm. And I thought it did it in such an interesting and powerful way in a story that wasn't a drama about domestic abuse. And it really kind of made me want to think about how I could incorporate real life horrors of the world into something with a speculative twist, because I really liked how well done that was. And I thought it was very inspiring, but I have not thought of anything yet that's just not overtly political or overtly some kind of social aspect, because it needs to have that twist of horror or speculative or something that allows you to tell the story through that instead of being really on the nose with it. So I'm pondering that, but I would love to see more stories like that.
Yeah, I love those too. I love stories that feel like they're, a lot of horror stories are like this, but yeah, stories that feel like they're about something real, even when there are speculative elements. That's kind of my favorite thing. I want to see more diversity of every kind always. And I especially want to see more diversity in which whatever diverse element is being depicted, like, it's not a story necessarily about that. Like, I don't really need any more like slave narratives. Yeah, I just want more. I want more of everything. I want more voices. I want more perspectives. I want new fun things that I haven't even thought of yet, basically.
So you guys have fantastic taste. I feel like you're creating like my ideal reading list, and I just wish I want all of these things to exist. I want you to create them. I would like more pulpy stuff. Like I want like I want like book equivalent of slashers. I want like all of like the pulpy good like I want gothic romance with like a side of horror. Like that's what I want to read more of. But I want to kind of see it done in a different way, with more diverse voices. But yeah, I just want a good clown slasher, but like I want, which actually there's Clown in a Cornfield, which is really good. But or like I want like Friday the 13th, but like write it like literary fiction maybe, or like vice versa. Like I don't know, and like any and, like those types of.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I was
Or
just
just,
gonna
like-
say, I will pre-order that shit right now, please.
I would like. I think that would be so good. I don't know if I'm the person to write it. That's what I want to read. I want someone to just like deliver me those.
You
books.
should go for it. I'd read it.
Hell yes, absolutely seconded. So speaking of that, so 2020 is also a very interesting year to be a horror author. You are competing against the news every day for scary things happening, but of course we know everything that's going on in 2020 is really just the culmination of things that have been happening for a really long time. For people paying attention, this is not a surprise to anyone. So how has it affected your writing or things you want to write about? Everything, the combination of like insert massive list of 2020 things here.
I don't know if it has for me, which is, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I tend to like, I tend to focus when I'm writing, and I think that, I think it's possible in a few years, I'll see something that reminds me, I'll be like, oh, this reminds me of something that happens in 2020. But the project I'm working on now, the book after Catherine House, it's not a sequel or anything, but my next book, the idea came a couple of years ago. So there's always kind of like a delay, so I think it's going to be interesting for me to kind of see this. It's funny because this whole year feels like a long trauma that we're all going through together. And it's like, much like any trauma, it's like, you're not quite sure how it's going to shake out until it's over, like while you're in it, you kind of just like, can just tell that this is a bad thing, but you're not quite sure what it'll be like yet, or at least that's how I feel about how it's affecting my writing.
For me, it's been a lot because I wrote The Year of the Witching a few years back, but two major elements in the book, there's like a pandemic and there's like a fascist theocracy situation going on. And so when all of that stuff is happening in real life, and then I'm trying to go back and forth between this like horrible world I've created and the horrible world that exists now, I'm just fatigued a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. And so it's just kind of like, it's like a little fucked up to like have to like go like alternate back and forth between the two. And I find myself like craving just like romance and all the things that normally, like I love romance, but I've never like leaned on all of the light and like fluffier things the way that I have amid all of this, because it's just strange to like write a world that is horrific and then our world like kind of tries to like match that, or maybe like it goes like beyond.
2020 has turned Alexis into a nonfiction writer.
It's been a lot. So I don't know how that's going to shake out as far as like the way that I'm writing or what I'm writing, but right now I feel like it's a lot.
I found in the early days of quarantine, I had this sense that all of my ideas were useless and small and meaningless and just so not relevant compared to the gravity of everything that was happening in the world. But then, a few months later, we kind of like, as you guys were saying, it's like, yeah, I just wanted fluffier entertainment, which when you're a horror writer, fluffy entertainment might be something really horrible and scary, but something that's distracting. And now I'm definitely all about distracting. Though I will say one of the strange things for me about this weird pandemic time, I mean, I've still basically been in quarantine for like 8 months, and I find my entertainment habits are really kind of different. I still really have a hard time focusing, like to read books. Like my reading schedule is like half of what it would usually be in a year. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know why. And with like even the things that
Did you go?
Oh, no.
I was gonna say, I hope we haven't lost Zoya.
No.
That might have been her phone. Well, we'll move on to the next question, and if she can pop in on another device or or something, we'll take it from there. So this is a women in horror panel. So are there any women horror writers, modern, not still alive, not alive, that you wish people would read more of, that you just are like, a cheerleader for?
It's weird because I've answered this question on other panels, and I say Elizabeth Thomas. I'm always like talking about Catherine House, and so it's kind of like I feel honored because it's like, I don't know, I'm like on a panel like with one of the people. I'm always like,
so yeah, this is really fun.
Lady Horror Joy, this is so good.
Yeah, yeah, I love the Year of the Witching. So this is fabulous. Yeah, it's funny. I don't read that. This will sound bad, but I don't read that much horror. Like I almost feel it's funny. It's sometimes I feel like Catherine House is kind of categorized differently depending on who's reading it. But yeah, I didn't read. I think I've read more in the past couple of years than I did anytime before. I was reading recently this Japanese author named Issa Nonomi. I would recommend her. That was some really fun stuff. What was the name of the book she wrote? It's called like,
is that the book with the bar of soap on the cover?
Yeah. And then like a little hair.
The soap. Yes.
That was good. That was nasty.
Absolutely.
That's just the first one that comes to mind. I was like, I love the Year of the Witching, and I love that nasty book. That was great.
Oh my God, they should take that and put that blurb on the cover.
Nasty. I love that.
I love this nasty book. I would buy this shit out of that.
That was really
incredible. So I have one final question for you before we jump into, because we're a little bit short if Zoe is not here. What are you doing for Halloween this year? Are you dressing up? If so, what is your Halloween costume? This holy of holy years. Oh, Zoe's come back.
Yay!
She's here?
I think.
Cross fingers.
Oh my God.
Yes, we got her.
Yay!
Oh, we still can't hear. We can't hear her though.
Oh.
Wait.
She'll come back.
I have faith.
So just to catch you up, we were answering the question of are there this being a women in horror panel, are there any female horror writers, modern or not, dead, alive, that you wish people would read more of? Oh no, we can't hear. Oh no.
Oh, is this connecting?
We can't hear you.
Oh damn. Well, this is life in quarantine, folks. This is our new modern world of living 100% on Zoom. Yeah. So if you want to put your answer in the chat, I can read it out loud for folks. If you want to type in some authors.
Why my audio is not working.
Oh, we got you.
Oh, it's working.
Yeah.
No, it seems like everything doing it through the phone, there's a long delay of like pushing on mute and all this. There's like a long delay. But anyway, oh my God. Oh my goodness. Anyway.
Oh yeah, what was the question?
So if you have a female horror author that you wish people would read more of.
Specific one of the things I was thinking about earlier today, I feel like I'm so behind on so many books, and it's like it's bugging me. I have such a long list of books I want.
We're all
to
gonna
read.
die with a 3-mile long TBR list. It's okay.
So
That's
say
what our
this,
tombstones are gonna look like. It's okay.
I read Catherine House, and it was so atmospheric, so beautifully written. I tried to get the Year of the Witching, and all of my local bookstores were sold out of it. So I guess that's a problem.
No, you're not. You're excited.
But I've not been able to get it yet.
So question for everybody. Are you doing anything for Halloween this year? Stuck in quarantine as we are. And if so, what is your Halloween costume? Truly the most important question of the year.
I want to be like a dying, like dark, bloody saint. So I have this like headdress that I'm gonna buy. It has like it's like a circular little like headdress, and then I want like to cry tears of blood. I don't know if that's a real costume. I think I just like the aesthetic of like I like undead saint, like a zombie saint. Let's go with that. That's what I want.
Amazing.
I think I'm going to, I'm not going to do much. I think we're just going to like wander around outside, and I'm in New York. So hopefully like, just people watch out in the streets. And I'm going to use a costume that I used a couple of years ago, which is George Washington Carver, the Black inventor of peanut butter. I always try to have my Halloween costumes be some celebration of Black excellence. And
Hell yeah.
yeah. And George Washington Carver is really easy because it's it's got a lab coat, so it's kind of he was a chemist, so it's kind of it's cozy warm, and I think that's all I need right now. We're going for comfort this year.
Hell yes.
I love that.
My hope for Halloween, I really wanted to give out candy to trick-or-treaters. I was like so excited to give out candy to trick-or-treaters this year because I've lived in an apartment building for decades and I'm finally in a house in a neighborhood with kids, but I got a bucket of candy, but I don't know if anybody's going to be coming. But my costume, if I decide to put it on, originally I was going to be my cat. I know that's stupid, but I was going to be my cat. And then I have these pair of fairy wings. So I decided I could be a Cat Wings character from Ursula Le Guin's Cat Wings. So.
Oh my God, I remember that. Yeah, I love that.
Love it. Okay, so I'm gonna open it up and start reading these great questions. But I do want to say, folks, if you're watching this panel because you are a fan of just one of the authors, I can guarantee you right now, every single book that these authors have written is just absolutely stellar. Buy them right now from Belmont Books. Take advantage of that offer where you can get multiple books. Truly, they're all just spectacular. So first one is from Lynn, who says, who were the women horror or suspense authors who you've read that you've loved or influenced you?
Shirley Jackson, of course.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
The Queen.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I mean, you got to say the Queen. I mean, we all got to pay deference at some point. And then for me, I always say like Charlotte Bronte, classic Gothic, and Daphne du Maurier, Rebecca. I mean, all those great haunted house books. Great Gothic. I mean, I don't know if you say horror, but suspenseful Gothic houses. Anything with a house.
For me, it was Margaret Atwood, which I know she's not a horror writer, but like The Handmaid's Tale is the most horrific thing I've ever read. So I'm gonna that she was a huge influence for The Year of the Witching and just in general. But of course, also like Shirley Jackson, who I love. I have Hill House right here. I write with it on my writing desk, just so I have something to aim for. Like, because I feel like if you fall like really short of this, you're still doing like really, really well. It's like one of the best ever. It's so good.
Yeah, I will say I bought Wonderland by Zoya because someone was my friend Adam from the Professional Book Nerds podcast was like, he pitched it as The Shining meets Shirley Jackson, and I bought it like 10 seconds later because I was like, that's all I need to hear. That's truly all I need. So the next question is from Rebecca, who is very kind. She says, Mallory, I really loved your audiobook and the fact that you narrated it. It added so much. Thank you, Rebecca. What are some of the panelists' favorite horror or speculative audiobooks or narrators?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I was looking at the chat.
Just
what was
if you have favorite horror audiobooks or narrators or like audio horror games at all.
This is weird for me. I've never read an audiobook or listened to an audiobook.
Yeah. Oh, my Alexa. I just got Audible like 2 or 3 days ago. So I haven't like officially dipped my toes into the audiobook world. So I'm not sure if anyone has any recommendations though.
None of us
I will say, let me expand the question. What about any scary podcasts?
Okay, now
Ooh.
this will be, I also have never listened to a podcast.
Why is
I
that?
love what are going on? What is going on with you in 2020? I don't know, guys. I have trouble concentrating when I'm just hearing them. I like totally zone out. I don't know what's going on with me, but
It's totally normal.
yeah, I need the visual, I need like the physical thing. So yeah, I've never done the podcast thing, and I never done the audiobook thing. But I'm glad other people enjoy them.
Yeah, I have this weird issue with disembodied voices. I don't like, I like to see something. I don't like to just hear voices. So like, I really don't listen to the radio or podcasts or audiobooks. I'm sorry. I know people love them, and I'm so glad people love them, and I'm so glad it's an alternate way to find books, but I would not be able to give recommendations. I'm sorry.
Well, I did just see someone say the audiobook for Catherine House is amazing. So check that out.
I'm glad to hear that. I wouldn't know.
I've actually heard that the audiobook for Year of the Witching is also amazing. So check
Thank
that out as well.
Thank you.
I will say it was really funny for the audiobook for Catherine House. They sent, to choose the narrator, they sent 6 audio files of someone reading out loud the first paragraph. And it was like the most horrifying thing I've ever had to do is listen. It's like hearing your voice on an answering machine or something. You're like, oh my God.
I hear you.
Is that my writing? Like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. I had to read my own audio. I read my own audiobook for Lady from the Black Lagoon, and no one believes me that I've never listened to it because I don't want to hear it. Like, I truly don't. I have no idea what it sounds like. I know people like it, but I would rather walk into the sea than listen to myself reading my own book.
I'm sure that the wonderful voice actress did a wonderful job. I love that her name was the same name. The person who did the Catherine House audiobook is also named Inez, the main character. So I just thought
that's so cool.
But otherwise, I'm not going to listen to that. My heart can't take it, but I'm glad it did. She did a good job.
So the next question is from Mary, who says, I've seen the author's books listed as literary fiction, horror, and suspense/thriller. How do they feel about fitting into genres or across genre?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this, honestly. I mean, I'll just be honest about it. I didn't know I was a horror writer until after Baby Teeth was published and people started calling it a horror book. And the people who started calling it that were readers. It wasn't how I had pitched the book to an agent. It wasn't how the book was pitched. And so I really had to give a lot of thought to what is a horror book, and ultimately decided a horror book is a book that readers find scary. And that seemed to be, to me, a completely legitimate definition for what a horror book is. But I know in terms of what I think of myself and what I write, like, I don't sit down and say, I'm going to write a scary book or I'm going to write a horror book. There are certain things I want to explore with my characters, but I don't think of them in terms of genre. So I feel like that's something that other people kind of put to it after the fact, whether it's marketing needs to decide that it's something so that they have a very clear path towards marketing it, or however readers experience it. I do find it interesting, though, that it seems to be so fluid that one person calls domestic suspense, somebody else might call horror. So I don't know, I find that interesting.
I agree. And I think that's I think a common experience for authors. That's how I feel exactly, where it's like, you think of the books that, like the things that you draw on, like I said, that I was thinking of, like Jane Eyre and Rebecca or something, the tropes that you're playing with and things like that. But I think it's rare for an author to sit down and think like, I'm going to write a literary suspense and this is the way it's going to be marketed and blah, blah, blah. I think that, I think it's always, at least, I mean, this is my first book, but it's been really interesting to see kind of like, oh, so that's what they're going to call it in this particular context. And I found, at least for Catherine House, that it really, like you said, I've seen it called many different things in many contexts. And as long as people feel it's accurate in that moment, I'll take it.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like my readership is so much wider because my book is like called all of these different things, and people kind of come to it not knowing what to expect. Like sometimes people ask me, is it adult? Is it YA? Is it dark fantasy? Is it horror? Is it a thriller? Is it fantasy? Is it dystopian? And I'm always just like, yes. And it's like all of it. And I think it's it's cool that like people can connect to the book in different ways. And I think that it puts like authors in a really good position. And it says a lot about the stories too, when like you're able to kind of connect with different audiences in different spaces, and there's kind of something for everyone.
So the next question is from Emily, who asks, what is your favorite part of the writing process?
Before I have to do any writing, like when I have the idea and it's really good in my head and I'm like, I've got this, the whole thing is, it's perfect, it's gonna be the best thing I've ever written, and then I get 30,000 words in and I'm like crying at my keyboard about how bad it is. Like that's the part that sucks. But the first part, before I've ever typed a single word, is my absolute favorite part, when it's all perfect.
You know, it's funny because that actually isn't, I think a lot of people love that part, but I get nervous because I don't know what this is about my personality, but when I haven't written anything, I'm like, oh God, how am I going to screw this up? I see a germ of a good idea here, but I don't know if I can pull it off. It's when I've already done one draft and then I've done a second draft and then I read it over and I'm like, man, this is terrible, but I can see how I can make it good. That's my favorite part, when then I'm going through and polishing it and, when I realize this doesn't make sense to someone who's not like on the files on my computer, but like draft 3.5, like that's always the good one. It's like when you have some sense of like, oh, I see now what I was thinking, and you can like see the completed thing, but you're not quite there yet.
So interesting, because we all have different stages that are our favorite. My favorite is the first draft. And it's not because the first draft is good, but there is, the process of writing the first draft. I'm a pantser. I'm a directional pantser. I feel like that's when the magical moments happen, where I had no idea this was going to happen, and I had no idea these things were going to occur, and it feels magical. That doesn't mean I don't go back later and go, oh my God, this is so bad. But they call it a vomit draft for a reason. But it feels magical in the moment, so that the first draft is always my favorite part.
I love that because I was like, I never like whatever. It's such a difference of perspective, right? Because it's like either it's magical or it's like nausea inducing that you're like, God, am I out of control right now? And yeah, that's why I'm the one who's hiding under the bed in the horror movie.
I love it. So Anonymous wants to know, thanks for a fantastic evening, ladies. Any tips for marketing your writing as a female horror writer, especially female horror writers who maybe don't consider themselves female horror writers?
I don't have advice for that personally, just because my advice would be to know whether, I'm depending on who is actually asking the question, like, are you planning on self-publishing, or are you planning on publishing with a small publishing house, or are you planning on publishing with a large publishing house? I think that depends on, that makes a huge difference in the marketing. And I think that, Catherine House is with HarperCollins, which is a huge publishing house, and that I'm terrible at marketing. And part of why I knew that, like, I have 2 terrible novels in my emotional desk drawer, and that I've actually written, but I haven't printed them. That's why it's an emotional drawer. Anyway, like I kind of knew that I wanted to do what I could to get with a big publishing house, because I was like, I personally would not be able to I don't know how to market myself, basically. So I guess my only advice would be to know how good you are at marketing, and given that, what you're going to need from the structure around your book.
Same. I know when I first started writing novels and I was coming away from film, and all of my friends were like, well, why don't you self-publish, then you can do it all on your own. And I'm like, well, that is precisely the problem, because I knew I didn't know anything about marketing. And it would be nice to say that I've learned things over the last couple of years. And while I've learned a little bit about how the process works, if left to my own devices, I really would not know how to do it. So I'm sorry for the person who wanted advice. I'm not sure what to offer. It's hard.
I would say do as much as you enjoy doing as far as marketing. Like, really more like the social media end of marketing, because I feel like people can tell when it's forced. So if it's just not your cup of tea, or you reach the point where it feels like a chore, then like take a hiatus or take a break and like just kind of don't do it, or just try to make it as enjoyable as possible and talk about the things that you like. It's the only way I know how to market, because I don't have anything by way of like strategy or any real information on that end. But I think people respond to like joy and excitement. So if you're talking about the things that you're excited about, then other people who are also excited about those things will find you.
I think we have time for us. One last question. We only have a few minutes left. Malika wants to know, can the panelists share whether they outline and what their process is? Besides crying, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
It's an essential part of mine. I'm assuming it's a part of everybody's.
I mean, I guess most people consider that they're either people who plot, plotters, or pantsers, people who go by the seat of their pants. For a long time, I called myself a directional pantser, in that I do write very spontaneously and very organically. But before I start writing a novel, I always know something that happens probably somewhere around the middle of the book. And I often know something that happens, if not at the very end of the book, something near the end of the book, so that I'm always writing toward that. And so that's what my process is. I know it's not perfect, but I don't seem to have the ability to, actually write out plots and outlines. So I do it this way, and then I have a lot of revising to do after the fact.
I want to contribute here, but my process is like exactly the same. Almost to a T. I'm a pantser, and then I know a few things that happen, and I write toward those. Like I call them, I think tentpole scenes is what I normally call them, because they're like holding up the structure of my story. I just try to get from point A to B and pray that it works out.
In the tent. I'm like, my strategy, I have a very specific writing strategy, but I almost don't know how to describe it. But I almost, when I try to describe it, I give an analogy of like, if you were sketching something, if you were sketching it well, you would like, you kind of like etch out kind of like, oh, this is where her head's going to go, and like this is where the arms will go, and then this will be where the legs will go, and then you go over it again and you're like, okay, and now I'm going to fill in more detail here, and now it's more detail here, and then you like just keep going more and more and filling in more details. That's kind of how I do it. I do one rough draft that's like usually 30,000 words long. That's very short for anyone who doesn't write and know. Anyway, and then I just kind of go through it over and over again, kind of swelling it with details and polishing it as I go. So it's, I don't know I don't know what that is, but it works for me. It's the only way I've ever learned how to write a book. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I tie my shoes weird too, but whatever works.
Still get them tied. That's what matters. Is whatever the best writing strategies are always the ones that work.
As long as it works.
So before we head out for the evening, again, I really, really recommend buying all three of these books, We Are the Witching, Wonderland, and Catherine House. They're all just absolutely superb. Get them from Belmont Books. So for each of you, where can folks find you online? Do you have social media places? Speaking of marketing, do you have Twitters or Instagrams or websites that you want people to go, newsletters maybe that people can go to find out about your future work?
I'm ElizabethThomasBooks.com. ElizabethThomas.com is a French baby photographer. Do not go there.
I know when she just left it at baby. So it's a French baby who.
No, she does like, those kind of like, like that Anne Geddes like baby in a flower type thing. Oh. She does that with brands. I've been emailing her trying to ask for her website. She does not want to give it up. So anyway, ElizabethThomasBooks.com. Elizabeth is with an S instead of a Z. And then I am Lizzie Thomas, Lissie Thomas, Twitter at Lizzie Thomas. And on Instagram, I'm at Tizzy Lamas. And I forgot how it's spelled, but that's me.
I am Alex H. Writes on Twitter, and on Instagram, I'm Alexis H. And then I did manage to get AlexisHenderson.com in spite of the fact that I have a very basic name, and there's a million Alexis Hendersons. But that's
you are the one with the website.
I won.
Hopefully there's a bunch of other Alexis Hendersons out there that are seething because they wanted the website.
If they pay me like 10,000, they can have maybe like 300 for no. They can have it.
Mallory, where can they find you?
Oh gosh, I'm everywhere. MalloryO'Mara.com. I also got my own name, which I was very, very excited about. I'm on a social media. I'm on a Twitter hiatus right now, but when I'm back, you can follow me on Twitter at Mallory O'Mara. Same thing on Instagram. If you want to hear me talk about books, you can listen to Reading Glasses. It comes out every week. It's on all of the major podcast things, iTunes and all that stuff. So yeah, just look up Reading Glasses, which we definitely don't have the website for that or the Twitter. We're trying for years, but nobody's given it up. And
So-
yeah, where do we find you?
So my Twitter is _, I'm an adult. I'm a bookseller at Belmont Books, but I'm also a romance novel reviewer at smartbitchestrashybooks.com. So I'm all over the place, but I do have one final question for all of you in terms of.
I'm just going to interrupt you quickly because we didn't get to hear Zoya's social media.
Oh, sorry, Zoya, go ahead.
My Twitter is at Zooshka, ZOOSHKA, and my Instagram is zoya.stage_author. Yes, that's right.
Because it is spooky season, what to you is the scariest element in horror? Like for me, I love Zoya's books because creepy kids are high on my scare list. Like clowns don't do it, serial killers. It's just like small beings, so like puppets or dolls or children are high on my scare list. So I'm curious, what is high on your horror list of things that scare you?
Oh, people's faces changing. Just like for some reason, it scares the ever-loving shit out of me. Me and my boyfriend watched Haunting of Bly Manor the week it came out. We were so excited to watch it. But that is an element. I won't spoil anything for folks who haven't watched it yet, which you totally should. But it's definitely an element of the scariness is people's faces changing. And we like binged it over the course of a few days, but one of the nights I woke up and I was so scared and I had to wake him up to make sure his face was still there. My poor boyfriend. I was probably like, it was just like probably the most terrifying thing for him ever, like me turning on the light and like shaking his shoulder like, Jeremy, do you still have a face? I don't know why, it just really is so scary to me.
So there is a One Direction music video that my coworker showed me where their faces morph into each other's faces.
Hard pass. No, keep your faces. Thank you.
Demonic possession. I don't know if it's because I was like raised religious or whatever, but I just can't deal with that. It freaks me out. The idea of not being in control of my body, which kind of does tie to the face thing, I think too, like that combination of like psychological body identity horror. Nope. Hard pass. I mean, I like to read it. I like to be scared, but I can't stomach it. It freaks me out.
You know, I'm trying to think. I actually, a lot of like actual horror movie things or horror book things don't really get to me. Like, I'm okay. I used to not be, but I'm okay now with haunted dolls and possession and stuff.
I mean, you did like that nasty book, so
yeah.
nothing phases you. So.
Yeah, I was a big scaredy cat when I was a little girl. Like I goosebumps and all that stuff. I was like, I'm not messing with that. But at this point, it's hard to really scare me. I'm just afraid of like, you know, like death. Like I don't want to die. It's like
Pretty good one.
average. I don't know. I'm afraid of dementia. I'm afraid of like.
You've got like real life fears.
Yeah, like I have a lot of real life fears, but I'm okay with. A demon could possess me. That's okay.
It's true that nothing is scarier than what happens in the real world. I mean, that's for sure true.
Is that what scares you most, Zoya, is real world stuff?
Definitely real world. I mean, in terms of entertainment, when we get away from the real world, I mean, obviously Evil Kids, I'll watch any Evil Kid movie. I'll watch any version type of Invasion of the Body Snatchers kinds of movies. They're really scary, but I love them. They're super creepy. But I would say the most vague element that I find really scary, it could be in a book or in a movie, is when something is just slightly off. And I know that's not a really great description, but I know it when I see it or when I read it, and something is slightly off and it just gives you the creeps because you can't quite figure it out if it's okay or not okay. So
I was hoping we would get a cat shot before.
Yay.
Oh,
Sorry. He just
what a-
woke up and he's like, all right,
what a
it's like 5
handsome
p.m. It's time for
man.
my dinner.
Thank you all so much, and for Mallory for moderating and all of these authors.
It
To
is
get on
truly an
Zoom.
honor. Like I said, we have talked about all of your books multiple times on reading glasses, so it was just so cool to be able to speak to you all and to talk to you about scary stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you. It was such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
And
Yes, thank
Belmont
you.
Books, 20% off, 3 books or more until Halloween. So you've got a few more days left. Not just these lovely authors, but whatever books you want. And thank you so much for coming out tonight and supporting an indie and supporting these wonderful writers.
Yeah, support indie bookstores, support women writing, buy all their books.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.